Right, now let's clear one thing up here. Who were you employed by there?
At the time, in 2002, the hospital was managed by a company called InterHealth Canada, and I have a contract with them to work from I think it was the 21st of September to the 30th of October, 2002.
Now you have a contract with them.
Yeah.
This happens that the young girl, tell us a story about the young girl that you cared for that caused this particular problem.
Yeah, this was a girl with acute myeloid leukemia, which is the worst type to have. She started her treatment, I think, in about June. I'm not 100% sure. Under the chap who was before me, who was actually in the job that I did the locum for. She had responded in a way, but she was never in remission of her disease, which is obviously a bad sign. When I took over there in September, she was still on chemotherapy and requiring transfusions of blood and platelets every so often, and antibiotics when she ran a fever because she didn't have any normal white blood cells. And unfortunately, on the 19th of October, she died.
Two things very quickly. First of all, she was dying.
Well,
with no hope of recovery.
I don't know about dying. She was, a bad leukemia who did not go into remission on chemotherapy. So that's a
Well,
very
from
bad,
a layman's point of view,
it's a bad sign. Yeah.
She was
Yeah,
dying.
the betting is going to be that she's going to die. Yeah.
Right. Secondly, you were not the final doctor that dealt with her when she died, were you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, she had a stroke at the end. I mean, on the 15th of October, she had a stroke, which is unconsciousness and due to cerebral vascular disease. The nurse and the father decided that the stroke was due to hemorrhage. The CT scan of her brain showed an obstructed main cerebral artery. The neurosurgeons who operated on her diagnosed what they call an infarct, which is damage to a section of the brain as a result of lack of blood, not of bleeding. And they, operated on her. They put a drain into the ventricle of the brain. And unfortunately, she did not improve at all. And after 3 or 4 days, they decided to remove the drain, and she died shortly after that. The murder charge was leveled at me because, according to the nurse Cyril de Leola, a Filipina with no particular qualifications that I know of, decided that she died of a hemorrhage. And this is actually written in the court report. And the reason for the hemorrhage was that I had not given her blood platelets to prevent the hemorrhage. She became unconscious as a result of a stroke. Now, this could have been due to blockage of an artery, plus bleeding, plus maybe an infection. She had a fever and obviously no white blood cells. The neurosurgeons who were called in decided to open her skull and put a drain in. And they then looked after her in the intensive care unit for the next 3 or 4 days till she died.
Now, at no point are these neurosurgeons that performed this operation called for evidence or also charged with culpable homicide or murder?
No, not at all.
Or being co-conspirators or whatever you
they
want.
were not involved at all.
Ever?
No.
And you worked for a Canadian company, a North American company.
Yeah.
Now comes the point that I'm moving to. They didn't stand behind you, did they? They just backed out and left you to hang out to dry.
Well, the thing is that the child died on I think it's the 19th of October. There was no particular problem that I knew of. I then, obviously speak to the parents. I left at the end of October, beginning of November, and heard nothing further. The Canadian company claims that the father or somebody asked to look at the hospital file presumably sometime in November 2002. In May of 2003, the Canadian company gave up running the hospital. They handed over to the local health authority. When the case started, I'm not quite sure, but it was probably towards the end of 2003, because judgment was given in March 2004. So when the case started, the Canadian company was not running the hospital. And they claim they were unaware of the case, which, may or may not be true, I'm not sure.
Doctor, let's be honest about this. They are now very much aware of the case.
Oh, yeah. No,
and what have they done?
They obviously are aware of the case, because the final judgment was, well, I was sentenced to jail. Blood money was paid to the father.
By whom?
Initially by the Health Authority of Abu Dhabi, who were running the hospital. And to my knowledge, InterHealth Canada refunded the Health Authority of Abu Dhabi the blood money.
Right, but
to my knowledge, I don't have it on paper.
Did not come to your assistance in any way whatsoever?
Not while I was there, no.
And now?
Still not. They've avoided talking to me, and
not even an apology. Glad you're home.
No, not at all. Not at all. InterHealth Canada has been completely silent.
Under international law, do you intend proceeding?
I don't know. I really am not sure what sort of case I would have, and I haven't really thought. Well, I've thought about it, but I haven't really.
Gross desertion, no. Gross negligence.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
There will be a suit, even if my husband doesn't want to do it, which he might not choose to. But I'm a person in my own right. I can sue too, and I will be going after people. Nobody can treat my husband like that. That is not acceptable.
Or your family.
Or my family. They've had to suffer.
What I'm doing at the moment also is I have some journalist friends that I made there, and they are checking through the Arab and English newspapers of the time to see what was written in the papers about the case, and whether InterHealth may or may not have known about it, at the time. However, the fact is they did pay the blood money, so they must have known something had happened.
Let us explain to our viewers that maybe don't understand what blood money is under Shahira law. Would you like to explain?
Well, I'm not 100% sure myself, but when somebody gets killed, whoever is supposedly involved in the killing can pay blood money to the relations. And whether that will get him off being sentenced to elsewhere, I'm not sure.
If the family accepts the blood money, yes, it does absolve the crime. You then went to court. You were found not guilty, but you couldn't go home.
Well, I could eventually, but I was found not guilty. I believe it was the 21st of March. The prosecution then had a month to appeal against the acquittal, which would have taken them to the middle of 18th of April. They did appeal. The appeal was then thrown out. And I think at the end, somewhere around the middle of April, the appeal was thrown out. So then, of course, there was a chance of another appeal to what they called a cassation court, which I'm not sure whether that did or did not happen. And then the question was just getting my passport and exit visa back, which took a long time. But again, I think purely just because of inefficiency.